Welcome to the True North Compliance Podcast, where we discuss regulatory and compliance issues for Canadian business.
Hello, I'm Sean O'Hara, and thanks for listening.
Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Colin Benesch, who is a funeral director and embalmer at Earth's Option Cremation and Burial Services here in Victoria, BC. He is the son of the founder and a third-generation funeral service professional. Colin holds the role of location manager and funeral director at Earth's Option, which is known for its environmentally friendly options and community-focused approach to funeral and burial services on Vancouver Island. Welcome, Colin. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Sean. Appreciate you having me.
So what do you do?
So I am a funeral director and location manager for Earth Options. So that kind of entails a little bit of a wide variety of tasks. But long and the short is that as a funeral director, we serve the folks here in the community of Victoria for all their funeral service needs, be it a cremation, witness cremation, burial, either traditional or green. We service basically from Chemainus and south. And we're always happy to help the Gulf Islands as well if folks need that service as well.
Great. And you're probably a heavily regulated industry. Is it the federal, provincial, municipal? What kind of regulations affect your industry?
Yeah, we're extremely regulated, and rightfully so. You know, we deal with sensitive topic, and we're dealing with vulnerable clients as well, right? Our families are very vulnerable states when they come to us. And so we're very heavily regulated on all levels of government. From, federal has its area, but it's more generic. Provincially, we're very heavily regulated. Municipally, we're very heavily regulated. And it goes everything down to Transport Canada, to CVRDs, CRDs. Basically, all walks of government life, they regulate us at some capacity.
What are some examples of those regulations, or maybe ones that would either interfere in what you're doing or that really have to direct what you do?
So they all have very real impact on whatever level they are. So on a federal level, Transport Canada is definitely one of the bigger agencies we work with that we need regulations and approval, get accreditation as well from them for having a secure cargo loading facility and secure cargo representatives as our staff. So that's kind of the federal level one. And then provincially, our licensing is done as a licensed funeral director and embalmer. All that licensing is done through the province of BC, through the BC Funeral Association, along with the ITA program and the Canadian College of Funeral Services. So those three entities work together to produce our funeral director licensing. Funeral school kind of works it's a 2-year program. It's an apprenticeship while you're doing the actual academics online. And then once you've finished each year, you have to write an ITA exam showing competence in the field. It's, a very independent test. It's not, overseen at all by the BC Funeral Association or the College of Funeral Services as well. So it's fully independent. ITA make their own questions. They send it to the funeral director students, and we have to get an 80% to get our licensing.
Oh, so it's quite a strict and quite a process. And 2-year program, you said.
Very much so, yeah. And in that 2-year program, the students are taking all of their courses online, correspondence, and then they also have their on-the-job training as well. So they're expected to work 40 hours a week on the job training, and then they're expected to do their 2 to 3 courses per week through the College of Canadian Funeral Service.
That's fascinating. So Transport Canada, that's, I guess, moving bodies, because that's what you do then.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's a newer thing too that never used to be as regulated. It kind of came in about 6 or 7 years ago now that Transport Canada wanted funeral homes to have a separate accreditation to be recognized. And then since they've rolled that ruling out, all domestic and international shipping of deceased has to be done by an accredited funeral home. More and more are getting their accreditation slowly, surely, but it's definitely been something that got sprung on us a few years back, and a lot of folks weren't prepared for it and weren't ready for the rule change to go over.
Do you know if there was something that prompted that? Usually there is.
Typically there is. There's no horror stories that I've heard specifically that made that one come to pass, but I just think that, at the end of the day, there's been a lot of a lot of just conversations around bad things happening in the States and some horror stories coming out of there, especially during the COVID times. So I think a lot of the government agencies said, okay, let's try to tighten up where we can as we can. But of course, as most government agencies, they don't speak to each other. So one changes a rule and nobody knows about it until they get told no.
And what about municipally? How's that affecting you?
Yeah, so municipally, we have zoning regulations for where we're allowed to have our funeral homes, along with zoning regulations for crematoriums, cemeteries. All those very much have real application in what we do. The most prominent one in that sphere is definitely crematoriums. So the Lower Mainland's a great example. There's no municipality in the Lower Mainland that will allow for a new crematorium to be built unless you go as far as Chilliwack. Your options of starting a new crematorium on the Lower Mainland is very, very slim unless you're going extremely rural, and in which case your travel time is going to become absorbent and become a big issue for serving those funeral homes in the greater Vancouver area. So that's one example of how municipal governments can really, with their zoning regulations, basically stifle our profession.
Why are they limiting them?
Nobody wants to buy a house by a crematorium. There's the environmental aspect of it, and there's the basically the ick factor, I guess you could say. And a lot of folks just don't want to have that nearby. In fact, we even have, we have a crematorium here on the island, and there's a crematorium that's been in Saanich for many years, and there's been houses around there for the entire time it's been there, and there still get complaints from neighbors who buy houses nearby the cemetery and the crematorium that's been pre-established. It's one of those things, nobody wants to be a neighbor of a funeral home, but everyone needs a funeral home. And so,
Yes.
it's one of those hard, realities of the world where nobody wants to live near a crematorium, but they're all going to eventually need the services of a crematorium, and they're going to be upset when that service is 4-week delayed because volume and there's no new crematoriums being made to service that.
Right. And Chilliwack is growing, so that'll fade soon too. Be the top of the Coquihalla.
Very much so. Yeah. And, that's the problem too, is as these cities get bigger, and, Abbotsford was a great example. They allowed it for many years. And then as they got bigger, they said, no, we're too densely populated now. We're building up. We're not building out. But we don't want them anymore. And so they've put up the red flag and pushed industry out further. And that's just made, again, more travel time, more costs, more delays for family. It's just a sad reality.
So does that mean that they're closing them, or are they just there until they end up closing?
They're basically grandfathering. So if I was to purchase, let's say if one of the crematoriums on the Lower Mainland decided to go for sale, I could purchase that company, keep the crematorium, and keep running it. They're just not allowing any new ones to be built. The real concern comes in is if some of these companies do decide to sell their crematoriums for whatever reason, hopefully they stay within the profession so we can make sure that they're still operating. Because if we lose that crematorium and it gets developed into a condo, we're never going to get it back. Lower Vancouver, Greater Vancouver is definitely a great example of where there's not enough crematoriums for the population and for the cremation rate. It's just, it would be detrimental to lose one of their machines right now. It's just huge impact.
This is a province with 1 million people, about a fifth of the population are over 65.
We're the highest cremation rate in North America in BC, which is something that doesn't get discussed a lot. Vancouver Island specifically, where we are, is the highest in North America, but BC as a province is the highest jurisdiction as well. It's significant. And, like I said, the population is of the elder demographic, and it is getting more and more. As a profession, we're not able to keep up with the amount of crematoriums, and even because of how heavily regulated we are, staffing levels have become a concern as well. We, on average, can graduate about 50 funeral directors a year. Our profession is not retaining them. We're having a high turnover rate because the stress of the job. The task of everything, the emotional wear on the funeral directors is huge. We have a high turnover rate of new apprentices coming in and not being able to survive the program and get through and get their licensing. And it's a concern for the future. Will we have enough funeral directors to serve the population growth that we're having?
Might seem obvious, but what are some of the stresses?
The stresses are definitely that we need some alternatives. So certain provinces like Alberta have a multi-tiered scenario where they can get licensing through 2 avenues. It's not just one. In BC, there's only one. Toronto has the multiple avenue for funeral directors as well. And in provinces like that, they're graduating about 100 students to 150 students a year. Where in BC, we can do maximum 55 because of all the regulations from different levels, we can't do any more. And of that 55, we're maybe lucky to have 20 to 30 of them actually graduate. And of that 20 to 30 of them, we're lucky to have 15 to 20 of them left after 5 years in the profession.
That's high attrition.
Very much so.
Yeah. So is it I guess the stress of the job of dealing with bodies, do they know what they're getting into when people choose this as a profession might be a
Yeah,
question.
there's definitely a lot of factors of why the turnover rate is so high. One of the big ones I always tell anybody who's interested in getting into the profession is that if you're trying to get rich and you want to have a well-paying job, funeral work is not for you. You need a real passion and drive to serve your community, the grieving families, and to really excel at wanting to be there for people and help them through the toughest time of their life. If you're in it to get rich, you're in the wrong profession. Lawyers and doctors are always looking. Go join those ranks. As a funeral director, you will have a livable wage. You will be paid a decent amount to have a decent life, but you will never be a millionaire riding on private jets.
Even though we all go at some time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the big misconception is the public seems to have this idea that funeral homes make a lot of money, and some of the big corporate ones do make a lot of money, but it's because it's a numbers game, right? They have a lot of locations across all of North America, and they're able to make that business model work, where a lot of the independent funeral homes are very much making enough just to make sure that their lights stay on, their staff are well paid, and able to maintain their staffing levels. And that's pretty much it. There's no private jets and yachts going on. It's very much for the people, and it's a service industry. We're very, very service focused. We're here to help families through the hardest time of their life, and I think that's a big misconception as well. But the stress for the students and why I think attrition is so high is that everyone comes in with great intentions, but the expectation of what is expected for the role is a lot. We have to be that pillar of calm and stability for families in the toughest time of their lives. And sadly, we're human too, and we feel emotion and we feel sadness too. And, we deal with the worst of the world, and we see heartbreak and we see the most tragic moments, and we have to be the pillar of calm and stability for that family in that time. And that takes a toll on a person.
And when the shift's over, then that can be hard on the directors.
Very much so. And we, as a profession, funeral directors get lost in the conversation of PTSD. It's slowly but surely coming around amongst us as in the profession. We're starting to be more open and talking about it amongst colleagues and carrying on. But, historically, funeral directors had very high alcoholism rate, and it was because the fact that a lot of them had nowhere to turn, and we were always lost in the conversation. Everyone focuses on our first responders for PTSD, but no one remembers the last responders, as we like to call ourselves.
I guess maybe because people view first responders and military and police as seeing the immediate after effects of violence or the actual violence themselves, and that funeral directors, by then it's all clean and tidy, but I guess not.
Big misconception right there. Yeah. So the police and the military will see the immediate violence right then and there, but guess who has to make that person presentable for their family and make sure that they are in a state where their family can spend time with them. So, you walk into a crime scene, you see a deceased, you call the BC coroner, they come and pick up the body. That's the end of the PTSD for that officer, where my team has to spend multiple hours, restoring this person, bringing them back to an appearance that's respectable for their family to spend that last quality moment with them.
That must
for that family too.
That's a skill too, then, doing that with bodies.
Very much so. Yeah. And embalming used to be very popular back in the day, and it still definitely has its place. But it's definitely used very much so for restorative purposes for violent accidents and tragedies like that. The family still needs to have a final goodbye.
Back to the crematorium issue and the shortage. What can be done about that?
So there's lots of different discussions going on. Me and my father have been big proponents and driving for the BC government to legalize Aquamation, which is an alternative to flame cremation. It would allow us to open aquamators in areas that no longer are zoned for crematoriums because there's no emissions. Basically, it's using water and potassium to achieve the same result as flame cremation is basically what it's doing. The technical name for it is alkaline hydrolysis. If anybody wants to look that up, it came out of Europe. many years ago. It's been used for humans for quite a while now. It's quite popular across the US and Europe. It's across most of Canada now. Just BC is one of the few provinces that doesn't have it legalized yet. Me and my father have been lobbying the government for over 8 years to get it done, and we're slowly but surely making some progress. Anybody who's interested, please write your MLA and let them know that you want Aquamation legalized.
How does the process work?
So it's the same as the flame cremation, where the body gets put into the Aquamation unit instead of a flame retort. But instead of using fossil fuels and fire to burn the body, we're using water and potassium to basically dissolve the tissue. So the same thing that would happen naturally when you bury a body straight in the soil, that takes about 2 to 3 years for the body to naturally break down. This is happening in a perfect environment and in perfect conditions to make that process happen over 3 to 4 hours, and leaving the same end result for the family of cremated remains. They'll just be a little bit larger in volume, and they'll be more not tinged by fire. So, depending on the casket, some cremated remains can come out gray or brown or black, just depending on the casket they're cremated in. Aquamation would remove that. Everything would come out nice and pure.
And a bigger urn then?
Slightly in volume, yeah. The urn size should still be suitable as with just standard urns there, but yeah, there'd be a little bit more in volume.
Why is the BC government is it slow or reluctant?
The conversation has shifted over my 8-year journey. So it went from originally me as the profession were the only ones pushing for it, and me as an independent was the only one really driving this. And they just kind of left it as, oh, you're just one shoe in the pond kind of thing, just making some noise. And as it grew and became bigger and bigger, and more people started to sign on, we got a lot of public involvement. We started the Aquamation Coalition of BC and started reaching out to more and more groups and people that are looking for environmentally conscious ways. And then the voice has grown over the years. And now the BC government is well aware of it. It's very much on their radar. I'm hopeful, knock on wood, to see something in the next 3 to 4 years as legalization happens. But yeah, I think it's a matter of when now, not if. I think the government is definitely on board that this needs to happen, just a matter of when.
When we first met, you had a booth at a event that was focusing on everything relating to death and planning and death doulas and so on. And you had a petition there for this.
Exactly. And that's something I've been speaking on publicly. I'm doing lots of different events, speaking to anybody who will listen. I give flyers out to every trade show I'm at, asking for support for Aquamation. It's definitely something that I just believe, in a time and age that we're in, where we're all trying to do our best to care for nature and the environment and the climate. If every profession could bring a solution like we're bringing with Aquamation to the table, we could really make a dent in climate change overnight. It's just really sad to see that, sadly, we have the slow wheels of government to make these things a reality. And we require those, legislation changes to make it happen. But that's always been my argument, is if every profession came together right now and said, hey, we all have a solution similar to Aquamation to help better our profession, whatever it may be, we could really tackle this stuff overnight. But if we have to all go through an 8-year process to get this legalized and we get the ball over the finish line where we can actually do the process, we might be waiting to 2080 before we've made any impact.
The government can be so progressive in some areas and not in others.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think it just comes with the territory being a large entity like the government, right? They have a lot of things to do and a lot of, hats to wear and a lot of important issues to pay attention to. But I think now in this day and age, with technology and with younger generations being really forward thinking, there's room to improve some of these processes that, hey, if we have some solid, proven, evidence-based technologies and solutions to some of these environmental issues, we really should be able to speed up the process to get them legalized. For example, the Aquamation one, it's legal in California, who has the highest environmental standards in North America. For the government to do a reassessment of the same environmental standards here in BC to make sure they meet their criteria, well, they should just know that California's criteria is more strict, and if they met it there, well, do we really need an assessment here? Like, we could save a few bucks and then speed up the process by removing that.
I've heard of a few industries outside of yours that have had issues where things are approved in California, which are so strict and so bureaucratic here. And it's not It's a bureaucracy. It's not even a certain environmental standard.
Yeah, and so instead of looking, my suggestion to the BC government, and this would just be for any political party, doesn't matter which one, but let's make a group of employees, government employees, that basically look at environmental regulations in other jurisdictions and say, okay, you guys meet our criteria, you guys don't. So if you guys pass an environmental law, then maybe we can speed it up because you've met the standards somewhere else that we trust, right? It should be carte blanche, but we definitely have some good partners across North America that we could look at to have that model with.
But with this Aquamation, is that relieving pressure on crematoriums because new ones can be opened? Do they have the same municipal issues?
Yeah, so that's still to be determined in BC. I know in California, that's why they legalized Aquamation, was that it wasn't so much of the same problem we're having in BC where it's zoning and municipalities saying no to crematoriums. It was more the fact that in California, everything is built up and it's really hard. So the Mayo Clinic was the real driving force in California to legalize Aquamation. And it's because they have a 40-story hospital. Well, to put a crematorium at the bottom there and to have a stack go through 40 stories is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to do. So instead, they put Aquamation units every 5 floors, and they don't need stacks because they can go down through the waste management system, no stacks required. So it was much more cost effective for them to put in those systems on those floors. So that was one reason why. And same with the first province in Canada that actually legalized Aquamation was Saskatchewan. And that gentleman did that out there. He had the same problem where the municipality said, nope, we will not zone for a crematorium. So he said, great, what about an Aquamation unit? They said, no problem, never heard of it, don't care, go for it. And so he started up that, and that was able to alleviate that stress for him and offer something different to families.
So it's the air quality then.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest ones, the air quality and, just emissions in general. And I think that's really why Aquamation is a great alternative, is it removes that concern.
What happens to the water?
So depending on the jurisdiction, it can either be tanked off through waste management and put into biomedical waste, or it can be put into the waste management system itself, just depending on what the municipal regulations would say on that. So it is really dependent. Because in Victoria, we do have a waste management center that cleans everything before it does get dumped into the ocean. I'm optimistic that we might not have to send it to medical waste, but it is very much to be determined. Every jurisdiction is doing it different.
And that would relieve the pressure then when that happens.
Exactly. And my biggest thing too, especially in Victoria, because we do have quite a few crematoriums and, we're not having the same woes the mainland is quite yet. For me, it's really just giving families options. We have a professional obligation to give everybody all the options for what they can't do. And a lot of people are concerned about the environment. And if we can cut out emissions and, make it a little bit greener for the environment and for the community, I think a lot of people in Victoria would very much want that for themselves. And, that's the legacy they've lived. It's the lifestyle they've always, protected and guarded. And we should be able to honor that in life and in death.
What makes cremation or Aquamation so popular? We have a lot of seniors here, which would explain why, but why is it so popular?
I think there's many factors, but I think there's 2 big factors. The first big factor is we're a destination city. Victoria is known for people to come and retire. It's not home. It's not where people were born and raised. They don't have deep roots here. So cremation is a very easy way to have the body cremated, send the ashes back home to Alberta, Ontario, the US, wherever they may be from, and then they can be, laid to rest with their family grave there. So that's definitely a big factor. And the biggest other one is cost. Cremation is a tenth of the price of burial, right? The average cremation on Vancouver Island is between $2,000 and $3,000, where, a burial is between $9,000 and $12,000 on the low end. If you have a big service as well, it's going to get up to $20,000, just depending on how many people and how big of a service. So yeah, cost is definitely a big factor as well.
Are there any new graveyards being opened up?
In BC, there's been a lot of green burial cemeteries opening, and that's kind of been the latest push, is to have more and more green burial cemeteries, which is wonderful. I am a huge proponent for green burial. In fact, when my father started the company is when green burial kind of became first a thing in BC and in Victoria, and we were kind of the Royal Oak Cemetery specifically was the pioneers in Canada to start green burial. They were the first to do it. They were the first to get it legalized and recognized. And we worked hand in hand with them to serve that population right away. And it is wonderful and absolutely beautiful. I highly recommend anybody who's traveling in Victoria and curious, go for a walk in the green burial section of Royal Oak Cemetery. It's wonderful. We're building protected forests under the legal right of memorialization, so they'll never be developed, they'll never be changed. And we're making brand new, beautiful forests with native plants, native trees that are going to benefit our communities, our environment for many generations to come. I think it's beautiful.
What is a green burial?
Yeah, great question, Sean. So the difference between green burial and traditional burial is pretty simple. So the traditional burial, we have a concrete liner that goes around the casket that the body's placed in, and the concrete lid goes on top, and then we fill the rest with the soil there and grass on top with the headstone, either laying down or standing up. That's a traditional burial. Green burial, we remove the concrete liner. The body has to be in a fully biodegradable container, no embalming, no artificial clothing, no plastics, no glass. It's got to be as natural as humanly possible. And then we bury the person in straight soil. And then once the burial's done, we plant different trees and shrubs and bushes and native plants that are all going to be planted right on top of the person. So we're repopulating that natural forest. I know at Royal Oak, they have some Gary Oaks they've been planting. Some arbutuses are in there. Very beautiful natural plants to our ecosystem.
Does that mean a lot more bodies can go in there? Because after 100 years?
No,
Or
because
how's that?
at the same time as we're filling in the graves there and we're planting the forest, we're not going to tear down one of the trees to plant more people, right? So if anything, it's going to spread out just like a regular cemetery would, but instead of a field of grass and stones, it's going to be a full forest, and that forest will get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so that's kind of more the purpose, is that we're building protected forests that will never be touched, right? As much as a lot of people have parks and, the government has, parkland and all that stuff, there's never say never, but there's always an opportunity and a chance that something could happen where it might not always be a park. As sad as it is to say, at least with green burial sections, they are protected under multiple laws. They're not just protected under parks, they're protected under place of memorialization, right? They have another level of security to make sure nothing ever happens to that.
That's always been the thing, being in something that will never degrade, and I could be dug up in 10,000 years and not much has changed, isn't my thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Buried a cat once in a towel, and I thought, this is the way it should be, the way it was done from the beginning. So at that same event, there was a woman who weaved coffins that I thought was quite interesting. So that would work as well.
Exactly. Those are great for green burials, and they could be anywhere from a hand-woven casket like she was offering, or it could be, anything from a mushroom casket that biodegrades super fast to a simple basic shroud where it's just a hemp cloth that wraps around the body, and it's as basic and natural as it gets. There really is options for everybody, and it really just comes down to, is it a financial option for you? Right? It is more expensive than a traditional burial, it's not more expensive than traditional burial. It's more expensive than cremation, but it is still a bigger cost than what everyone comes to think.
Just without the casket and so on, but still a significant enough cost. Plus the plot of land.
And that's the big one, right? So that's where a lot of folks get confused, is that the funeral home and the cemetery are two separate entities. Our bill for a basic graveside service is, hovering around $2,700 is average for just the basics. And that's without picking the casket, right? So depending on the casket, it could be as small as the hemp shroud, which is, about $250, or as high as the mushroom casket, which is beautiful and fancy, and it's about $6,000. So the variant is large, but then the plot is also the big expense too. Great plots can be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, depending on the cemetery, depending on the location.
Are there any voluntary standards, like industry certifications, that you've adopted that would separate you from other planners and funeral?
Almost all funeral homes have to follow the same certifications and standards for a lot of the basic stuff. So embalmer certification, funeral director certification, those definitely require the same level of education across the board for any running funeral home here in BC. And that's managed by the BC Consumer Protections Authority. They make sure that everyone's got their license, it's all up to date, including their funeral license, all that stuff. But when it comes to specialized certifications. We are members of CANA, which stands for the Cremation Association of North America. They do a lot of extensive training for cremationists to allow best practices, best environmental standards, when to cremate larger people to produce less emissions versus when to use smaller people, what temperatures to get the best results and everything like that. So we put our staff through that training so they have the highest of industry standards available to them. And we take pride in making sure that all of our staff have all availability to keep learning. We as humans never stop learning, and we believe that as a company culture, that we want our staff to continuously learn and improve.
That's quite a complex thing you just mentioned about even the body size and when to cremate.
Very much so. And that's, a lot of the part of folks don't always fully understand that, there's a lot of moving pieces to what we do. And there's a lot of hands that move behind the scenes. A lot of folks are like, why are your prices so high? It's not that we want them to be this high, but they don't see that there's 4 other staff members behind the scenes working tirelessly to make sure that this all moves in a smooth fashion for the family in a dignified way in a reasonable time frame as well. Smaller operations don't have as many staff. They are able to keep their costs lower because they have less overhead from staffing. As we grow and get bigger, you need good people. And, when we started Earth's Option, it was me, mom, and dad, and there was 3 of us, and we had our prices low because there was only the 3 of us. Well, now we're a team of 9, and we're still growing, we're still getting busier, and the population still needs that level of service. And I have to pay people the right wages to make sure that they stick around.
Any other misconceptions about funerals and cremation services or lack of knowledge?
Tons. There's tons. We could talk all night for that, Sean. No, a lot of the big ones is just very much that funeral homes prices are designed to be predatory. That's very much not the case. We're all designed to fill specific niches and specific markets. Some of the bigger funeral homes will have larger prices because they have larger overhead. They have larger teams. They're doing things to level of excellency and high level standards to make sure that families get the feel that they're looking for. Like any business, there's multiple levels and multiple tiers. There's some companies that are focused on direct cremation and they're cheaper on the price range. And there's some funeral homes that are kind of right in the middle that try to serve a little bit of everybody, but they can't quite keep up to the high level of standard of some of the big guys. So it's very dependent on what you're looking for. And just like we as individuals are individual people, if every family has individual needs, and some want 200 people at their service, some people don't want anybody at their service, and that's okay too. It's just a matter of what is right for that family. And that's our job, is to give people guidance in the toughest time of their life, to give them the service that they need, not what's expected of them. It's what they need.
Colin, thank you. This has been fascinating and very educational. And how can people reach you?
Thank you for the opportunity, Sean. It's been a pleasure. They can reach me via email at colin@earthsoption.com. That's Earth with an S, option with no S. Or you're welcome to call our office at 778-440-8500. Or you can go to our website, earthsoption.com.
And also for the petition you had about Aquamation, what can people do about that?
Yeah, definitely. So anybody in the Vancouver, Victoria, BC market or region, please write your local MLA. Any MLA in BC would be very beneficial to have this top of mind for. And you can also go to the BC Aquamation Coalition website for more information.
Well, thank you so much. We'll also put up those links in the show notes. My guest today has been Colin Benesch, a funeral director and embalmer at Earth's Option Cremation and Burial Services. Thank you for being here today, Colin.
Thanks again, Sean. Appreciate the opportunity.
And that's a wrap.